Welcome to DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630, the sports capital, where we shine a light on local stories from the District, Maryland, and today Virginia to inform, enlighten, and inspire you. I'm Barbara Britt, and I'm delighted to welcome as my guest this morning on DMV Spotlight Matthew Hallinan is the president of the Northern Virginia Veterans Parade. He himself is a Marine veteran, and he's been an advocate for veterans, and he's been active in that community for over a decade. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me today on ESPN 630.
Thank you for inviting me, Barbara. I appreciate the chance to spread the message to all of your listeners.
So Veterans Day is coming up, and you have the 11th annual Greater Manassas Veterans Day Parade coming up on November 2nd in Manassas, in the Manassas area. So tell us about how this all came together.
Well, first off, we're the Northern Virginia Veterans Parade now. We've grown exponentially, and we want to include much more people. We have more of a greater impact on the area. So, thanks to that, we're moving in the right direction, I think.
That's fantastic. So where do they have the parade?
They have the parade in the city of Manassas. Old Town Manassas is a great, charming town filled with restaurants and pubs and, cafes. So it's a great area.
And do you normally get a good turnout of folks coming out to support you?
Every year has gotten bigger and bigger. That's why we also changed the name to include other units from outside of our local area. So, yeah, it's great.
So when people come and they bring their families?
Yes, they do, and we welcome that. It is a free parade. There's plenty of parking at no cost to the public. Come out and support the nation's veterans and their families.
So when people come out and, every parade has its unique things that make it exciting.
Right.
So if I'm sitting on the curb or I'm standing along the street in Old Town Manassas, what am I going to see as you all are coming by?
Well, there's going to be so much. The parade is very large this year. We have active military units. We have ROTCs. I think 11, 12 bands this year.
That's
marching
fantastic.
bands.
Like from some of the local high schools?
That's correct. From all over, and some come from out of state now, which is really great because people are hearing of us and coming down to show their support. We have bagpipes, different military vehicles, floats. It's really starting to grow.
That sounds like so much fun. So now I'm gonna back us up a little bit because obviously this didn't happen overnight.
Sure.
And so this is really your heart to try to serve veterans, veterans who've come before, veterans now, and veterans to come. So tell us how that all got started for you.
Well, it's a family tradition for me. I have family members that have been in the military going all the way back to the Civil War to present day. My father himself ran Arlington National Cemetery. He took that over in 2010 and fixed it after the scandal, and recently retired in 2016.
That is amazing. Some of the most solemn moments of my life, I think, have been there. And if I can just digress for 1 second, if you have never been to the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknowns, it truly is just it's a life-changing moment.
Well, I tell people if they want to see heroes, everybody looks at ball players, actors, things of that nature. They're not heroes, they're just entertainers. You want to see some real heroes, go down to Arlington National Cemetery. It's filled with them.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And what I really appreciate is that you are keeping alive a lot of the stories of these veterans. So for folks who want to know a little bit more about you, you said that you come from a long line of people who've served the country in the military, but you yourself, a Marine, always a Marine, once
Yes,
a
ma'am.
Marine, always a Marine.
That's correct.
So how was that for you? How did you get started?
Well, I think that 9/11 had a serious impact on me. I was in New York at the time. My father was by the Pentagon at the time. It's something that I think changed a lot of Americans' views on things and called them to service. I think everybody should serve this nation in some capacity. I've done it. My family's done it. And like I said, it's also a family tradition, the Marine Corps. My dad's also a Marine. So I followed in his footsteps, and I think that I've learned a lot from him.
That is absolutely awesome. And then when did the whole Veterans Parade idea, how did that evolve?
That happened about 12 years ago when a bunch of veterans got together from multiple services and sat down and said, we really need to be doing more community outreach and bringing people together to teach them about veterans and what they go through and the importance that they serve in our community and for the nation.
why is that now missing in our culture? I know that's a large question, but
Sure.
how did that happen? I mean, I know. Well, let me let you answer it instead of me trying to figure out the question.
Well, I think that, everybody's familiar with social media and the news, and, they report a lot of things about veterans being treated badly. Michael Murphy himself had his memorial vandalized on Long Island, New York, smashed into pieces, and the community had to come together and take care of that and show people that we really care about the veterans and try to do the right thing by his family, his father, Dan, his mother, Maureen, great people. I'm sure that was just a terrible thing for them to have to go through after already losing a son. So, our heart is with them, and we just wanted to show people that, hey, these guys are out there putting their lives on the line, and that means something, and you just don't go around disrespecting them and breaking monuments and spreading hate, really.
And I think that we don't understand. I mean, Americans, we are very spoiled in many, many ways, and we enjoy a lot of freedoms. And I'm not sure that unless you have served, you really do understand what the cost is that people pay and that their families pay.
I think you're absolutely correct, and the reason why we have those freedoms is because of these veterans that we spoke of. But I think that anybody who goes outside the United States and sees other countries can learn real quick about how great America really is.
So let me ask you a couple of questions, because you mentioned Lieutenant Michael Murphy, and as you and I had chatted a little bit beforehand, some people might be familiar with his story because it was portrayed in Lone Survivor. So tell us where people might be familiar with that. You said there's a book and the movie, but then let's
Correct.
go back and talk a little bit about his story. So what
Sure.
the book was also called Lone Survivor.
Yes, the book was written by Mark Luttrell, who was the actual lone survivor and only surviving SEAL member that day. The movie starred Mark Wahlberg, so people are probably a little bit more familiar with that, and that's where they've learned of the story. But, a lot went down that day, and
So-
it should be told.
So that was June 28th, 2005, and Lieutenant Murphy and 3 other SEALs, Navy SEALs, were behind enemy lines in Afghanistan.
Correct.
I don't know a lot about Afghanistan. It does not look like very friendly territory to me.
No, it's very rough terrain. They were serving in Operation Red Wings. That was the name of the operation that they were on, and they encountered some locals. And his team had to make a decision. Do we kill the locals? Do we tie them to a tree? What is it that we do? And Michael Murphy, being the outstanding officer that he is and leader, decided to let them go. He wouldn't hurt any unarmed people, knowing that they would go down and notify the Taliban and the fighters, the Tiger fighters of the other side of their presence. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, I think that's really speaks to his credit, the integrity that he has. I think that's what all American military officers should aspire to, being able to make the hard decisions even if your life is in jeopardy.
And that was something that he continually did on that day
Yes.
because they were outmanned, they were outgunned by these mountain tigers. There were 4 of them and over 50 of the enemy trying to kill them.
That's correct, but I don't think that the SEALs would ever feel they're outnumbered and outgunned, even if there's just one of them.
I will never say
They're
that
a great
again.
group. They're a great group,
They're
and
very
they fought
strong.
very hard that day. And one part about that day that I found particularly outstanding was when Michael Murphy had to put himself in harm's way, right out in the open, making him a target to the enemy, so he can get a signal on a satellite phone to call for help. While that was happening, that call, at the end of the call, he said thank you, and continued to fight, and that's where he was picked apart and shot and killed.
That is absolutely unbelievable. I was reading the backstory that you had sent me, and that even as he was making the call, literally his thumb was shattered off in a blast while he had to make that difficult decision in order to get some help in for these men, for these 4 SEALs, that he had to go out into the open, away from the mountain, making himself a target so that he could get that call for help out. So when the help starts to come, the U.S. military responds, they start to send in some help. tell us what happens in the rest of that story.
Well, this whole story is a tragedy. Anytime you lose fine men like that, it's a terrible thing. But when the help came and when it arrived, it was shot. The helicopter was a Chinook, was shot down by an RPG, and what that is, it's a rocket-propelled grenade, and it killed all 16 members on board, to include Army Night Stalkers as well as SEAL team members. And it turned out to be one of the worst days for special operators in a very long time.
It is just so heartbreaking. So you decided that this year, was it you, or did you have a team of people who decided that Lieutenant Murphy was the person, obviously very, very deserving, to have the parade dedicated to?
Well, I was the person who brought it to the board, and we all unanimously voted that it should be Lieutenant Murphy. I think that he represents the United States Navy in a great way. I think that they'd be very proud to have him as the dedicated party this year. I think it speaks to their true, how great the Navy is. And sometimes, people get a bad name and whatnot, but a person like this highlights that they're all pretty good people, and I think that's important.
So each year, do you have a different member that you dedicate the parade to, or is this something relatively new when you're doing the parade?
Actually, last couple parades, we dedicated it to Officer Chris Young and Officer Ashley Gwindon, Marine veterans and Prince William County police officers. Sergeant Connor, a City of Manassas police officer and an Army veteran who lost their lives in serving the community. They went from one uniform to another, serving the nation to serving the community, and ultimately losing their life on duty.
And those names are very familiar to me, but I'm not remembering the story.
Okay, I think you would probably know of Ashley Gwindon.
Yeah, I do. I remember that name.
What happened with her is, on her first tour of duty, an hour into her first shift, she was shot and killed.
Yes.
Tragic.
Yes, because she went to respond. It was a domestic.
That's right, and those are always the worst ones for officers to have to respond to, because they can turn on you at any minute.
Yes, I do remember that, because she had just shown up and she was shot and killed. And that was some years ago.
Yes, it was a few years now. I mean, it's amazing how time flies. But
she was young.
Yeah.
So that's who had dedicated it to, and rightly so. And then you mentioned the male police officer, who also that you dedicated it to.
Right. Sergeant Connor was also responding to a domestic, and he was shot and killed on that. And that's from the City of Manassas. He's a police officer there. And Chris Young was responding to a call for help. He pulled out behind an ambulance, and he was struck by a motorist on Route 28 and Piper Lane in Prince William County.
And so I think that's the other piece that we have here, Matthew, is that we forget that veterans are our neighbors, and that we all live together, and that the people who serve us in the community, whether it be in the military or whether it be police officers, firefighters, EMS, rescue people, that they live right next to us.
That's right.
And so so tell us a little bit more. I know that you are doing all your best to organize it this year, and that's a huge job. So tell us how all those logistics come together.
Well, hopefully seamlessly. And it is a lot of work, but what we do is we have a fundraising department that handles all of the fundraising. We have the operations department, which puts the parade together and organizes all the units. We have people that work on social media. It's a team effort, and I'm proud to have been able to lead them.
That is fantastic. So even just when people arrive, you mentioned you have all these different school bands, and then different units are coming. Do you stage them somewhere and say, all right, you guys line up here and you guys line up here? I've never even thought about that.
That's exactly what we do. We have a starting line, and we put them down different streets, and then we move them into place, because it is so large, as they start moving down the road to the reviewing stand, which is on Center Street.
That is so much fun. Now, how does the crowd respond when everybody comes through? Do they have favorites, or does it just depend?
Well, I'm sure that there are a few favorites, because, you have kids' parents supporting them when they're in the band and whatnot. But I think that everybody really appreciates it and has a good time with it. There's a lot of interesting vehicles and groups that come through. And it really has been a great turnout for the last few years. It's growing and growing.
That's fantastic. I'm speaking this morning with Matthew Hallinan. He's the president of the Northern Virginia Veterans Parade. He himself is a Marine veteran, and clearly his passion is for veterans and people who serve our country. And I just want to remind folks that the parade is on November 2nd in Old Town Manassas, starting at 11 a.m. I'm sure you all will be there much earlier than that.
We are, and we hope that other people arrive earlier as well so that they can find parking before the police close down all the streets as well.
Oh, that's a good point.
So we ask the people to get out there early, get your spot, get situated, enjoy yourself in the town, and then, enjoy the parade with us.
Okay, so you mentioned that when folks are coming in, there's parking, free parking available for them. And so folks who are familiar with Old Town Manassas, where should they go?
Well, they should go right to the parking garage by the VRE at the Amtrak station. That's a very, very big parking opportunity, and there's several around there. But if they visit vetpar.org, our website, it lays out all the routes that they can take and where they can park, and handicapped accessible areas, things of that nature.
That is great. Over the years, you have also had people who have been the Grand Marshal for the parade, and that is also an honor you do not take lightly. So tell us about the Grand Marshal for this year, for the 11th annual Northern Virginia Veterans Parade.
The Grand Marshal is Robert Terrell. He served with the 7th Fleet between the years of 1942 and 1944. He also was one of the founding members of the Prince William County Fair. He put on that production for many years, and unfortunately this year will be the last one. So he was a community guy, always helped everybody, and we felt that, he's the guy that should be the Grand Marshal for all he's done.
So for the Grand Marshal, what are his duties?
To show up and ride in the Jeep and have a good time.
And he's going to wave at everybody.
Right, wave, do a lot of waving. And may I ask, how old a man is he? Oh, he's in his 90s, yeah, so that's right, yeah.
That's awesome.
He's a World War II veteran, and unfortunately we're losing a lot of those guys every year. The first parade was World War II, and to be there with those guys and to have somebody that, jumped on D-Day and stormed the beaches, who's now a frail old man, come up to you and look you in the eyes and thank you for all you're doing for his brothers and for the military community is just something that, just moved me. It really did. We also had another special parade. I think that would be the Vietnam parade. Unfortunately, unlike my generation, they didn't come home to welcome arms, charities, different resources. They didn't have anybody but themselves or each other. And I think that it was important to give them that welcome home parade. They really, really appreciated it, and it was a big turnout, and we're happy to have done that.
That is awesome. And I think, every study that we read on homelessness, there's always just such a large amount of veterans who come home and then they end up being homeless, and that's just the most heartbreaking thing, and I'm sure that is a difficult reality. Tell us what it's like for a veteran to come back and try to integrate into society, and what are the challenges that veterans face even today?
Well, I could speak from my own experience. Everybody thinks it's going to be an easy transition, but you realize you're not quite like everybody else anymore, and people are doing things a certain way or might go a little too slow where you're used to getting things done. You have to learn to, adapt back in society, and that takes a little bit of time for anyone. I think that some of the guys like from Walter Reed that have lost limbs and things of that nature, it really takes a lot for them because not only are they rebuilding their bodies, but they have to get in the mindset that they're cared about and they're still, members of the community and fathers and mothers, that we accept them and we want them here around us, and that's what we use this parade for. We use it also as a platform to bring these things to light.
Do you feel that there is enough resources for veterans when they come home? I mean, we do hear about a lot of various organizations, and we all know that the VA has had its issues. And what do you think is happening at this point for veterans?
Well, I think unfortunately they're not getting the information. A lot of them. I mean, there is a ton of resources, but they're not getting connected with it. Let me give a quick shout out to Judge William Jarvis and the Assistant Commonwealth of Prince William County, Brad Marshall. They set up a veterans docket in the court. And what that does is it helps some of these struggling veterans that find themselves in issues come but not have to go through the system and be thrown in jail, but to rehabilitate them and connect them with the resources that they need. And I think that's an excellent program that Judge Jarvis put together.
That's fantastic. It just reminded me very quickly. I know in other jurisdictions they have like a drug court, and they do a similar thing where instead of putting you into the prison population, they get you the help that you need so that it ends up helping. So this program was piloted in Prince William County.
Correct.
And that's what it's called, is the Veterans Docket.
That's right. I believe it's the first Monday of every month.
That is amazing.
It absolutely is, and I'm proud to have supported it.
That's fantastic. So if you could just what do you think are the biggest issues facing veterans from these different generations? Obviously, we know that coming back from the Vietnam War was a very difficult time, and those veterans were not welcomed. But you mentioned that the gentleman from World War II looked at you and called you a brother.
Oh, right, exactly.
So tell us about that bond for those of us who've not been in the military. What does that really mean?
Well, coming from a guy like that who was a part of the D-Day invasion, it was something that, touched me deeply. What those guys went through, they were getting picked off left and right. And, now you got kids playing video games, Call of Duty, World War II. And, those guys didn't get a reset button if they got into some trouble. So for somebody to survive that and to make it into his 90s and look at me and say, thank you, that was just remarkable. I had another parade that I felt was groundbreaking, and I think that you'll appreciate this. I think your listeners should fact check it, because I have, and we're pretty proud of this fact. It's the women's parade that we did. We're the only veterans parade in the nation that has ever done a women's parade. Period.
That is staggering.
So we made history that day in Old Town Manassas, and we're very proud of that. And I think it's amazing where you find inspiration sometimes from. And, I had the opportunity to work with Diane Carlson Evans from the Women's Vietnam Memorial. I got to spend some time with her and also go down to the memorial with all of her sisters and have that moment, and to see how much it meant to them. She herself was a combat nurse. All the things you can imagine she could have possibly seen. And then I have a lady friend of mine who's an Army officer with many years of service and a remarkable record of accomplishments. And, I knew I had to do something. I think she moved to Thailand or something like that now, but I hope she's well wherever she is. But she was also an inspiration in putting together this women's parade. And we're very proud of that, because women serve too. They're a part of the team. They started many years ago as admin, and now they're flying fighter jets. So I think that shows not only how great the military is, but how we've grown as a nation.
That is absolutely amazing. And I'm remembering a story because I have a dear friend whose father survived Pearl Harbor. And he would tell the stories that there were actually the nurses were in some of the buildings beyond where the ships were being bombed. And those are the nurses who came out and tried to help. And I don't know whether they were in the military or not. I honestly don't know, but they certainly served at that time. And just this week, there was a new burial at Arlington of a young man who had been pulled, who had gone down on the USS Oklahoma. And they had finally been able to identify the remains. There were over 500 men on the Oklahoma, and they had pulled the ship up, and then it took them so much time to identify. And they've only been able to identify, I think, like 73 of them. And it's taken all of this time. And they just had a service for him at Arlington. He was 24 years old. Unbelievable.
A lot of these guys were teenagers.
Absolutely.
They didn't have a chance to grow into old men and have families. They made that sacrifice for the rest of us. And that's why, going back to what you said earlier, Americans seem to feel entitled and,
spoiled. We're spoiled.
But it's because of the service and sacrifice that they gave that we're able to live in this great free society and enjoy the things that we enjoy.
And I think I appreciate the fact that you have it on, around Veterans Day, because a lot of times when there's Veterans Day or other federal holidays, people are like, oh, good, I have a 3-day weekend.
Right.
And they don't necessarily take the time out. There are certainly ceremonies at military cemeteries. There's places you can go. There's things you can do, and obviously the Northern Virginia Veterans Parade is one way that you can go out and honor our military in honor of Veterans Day.
And that's the reason why we do it the first Saturday in November, because we want to give the military units also an opportunity to come down with their families and enjoy the parade or participate in it. As you go further into the month of November, you have the Marine Corps birthday and then ultimately Veterans Day on November 11th. So that's the main reason we hold it there, so that more people can participate and the veterans themselves can enjoy it.
That's fantastic. Now, tell me about just, we've talked about a lot of the heavy stuff, but just some of the fun stuff. You mentioned that Old Town Manassas is such a great place to have it.
Yes.
Do the businesses welcome you? Have you felt like they've been supportive?
Absolutely. We actually received an award this year for 2019 Best in Manassas for Veterans Organization. It was a great accomplishment and shows us that we're going in the right direction and that we're visible. You yourself inviting me here on this national program shows that we're visible and people are caring and bringing us together, and I think that's very important.
That's awesome. And you mentioned that you have people who are in charge of the fundraising, and what kind of efforts happen there if people are listening saying, wow, this is amazing, I'd like to support them?
They can go right to the webpage, vetpar.org, to do that. We are a 501c3. And we're a little bit different than some other ones in the fact that we don't make a profit at all for ourselves. Nobody gets paid. The excess money, we use the parade as a platform. We donate it to the ROTC, the bands, different veterans groups. So we're doing a lot of good with money. We do save a little bit for the next year's parade, but ultimately nothing comes into our pockets. It all goes back out to the community and the veterans. I feel that's very important to say these days. Absolutely
true. And then obviously you have to have people helping you. I know within your organization, do you have other volunteers who sign up that day to serve?
We do. We have plenty of volunteers. It's getting easier to find them now. The board of directors is a great group of former military people from ranks of colonel all the way down to corporal. We have a lady who's a member of the American Legion Women's Auxiliary. She sits there and listens to all our nonsense, so she's a saint.
She keeps you in line.
She's a saint. Carol is her name. She's a wonderful person, and it really is a great team made up of different personalities, and I'm like I said, I'm honored and proud to have been able to lead them.
That's wonderful. And then I have to ask you, because I know it's a military. Do you have it rain or shine?
Rain or shine.
I would think so. What's the Army saying? If it ain't raining, you ain't training. So for folks coming down, again, they can go to www.vetpar.org. Mm-hmm. They can find on the website. It's very well laid out. The parade route, the best places to be, the parking, the logistics. If you want to volunteer, maybe help next year, certainly donations. There's a place where you can participate in that as well. Do you have a favorite spot you like to stand on the parade?
Well, normally I would always be coordinating the parade. This past year I walked in the parade, the first parade I've ever walked in, 12 years later. So, I don't think I really have a favorite spot because I'm always moving around, but I'd like to find one.
I'm sure someday you'd like to be still. And is there a special seating area?
Yes, we have a reviewing stand where we put all the dignitaries, the Grand Marshal, elected officials, people who, other veterans groups, leaders, and they get to sit there and enjoy the parade as it comes by.
That is just amazing.
It is. It's a wonderful time.
I'm so excited. So I just want to remind folks of the details. It's Saturday, November 2nd at 11 a.m. in Old Town Manassas, but get there early. Don't be late. You need to get your parking spot and get in line so that you can be there cheering everybody on. I want to thank you so much. I want to thank my guest, Matthew Hallinan. He is the president of the Northern Virginia Veterans Parade. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today on ESPN 630 on DMV Spotlight on the Sports Capital. I'm Barbara Britt.